Yes, welcome in. Wisconsin, 0-1 in Big Ten play. Things did not necessarily go the way they wanted to, Jesse, on Saturday as they fell 27-10 to Maryland. The score probably not indicative of how much Maryland dominated the game. We're going to get to all of it. We're going to jump into everything that went right. We may be setting a record for how short that segment is. And then what went wrong in that game. But also, it feels like, just like we perhaps did last week, have to do a little bit of a big picture view of where things are. Chris McIntosh came out and spoke yesterday without even being asked to speak. That's how things are going right now. So we're going to jump into all of it. Again, if you're listening to this, we do have a YouTube channel. I actually ran into a couple of friends this weekend that we're talking about how much we've been pushing the YouTube. I don't care. Going to keep on pushing it. We certainly appreciate all the support we get up there. So go check it out, the camp YouTube. And then BadgerConnect.com. Jesse wrote about yesterday's game. It's got plenty more coming up. We joked about this last week, or at least talked about it. We are going to have an episode of The Swing coming as well. So we've got some basketball coming, considering what happened on Saturday at Camp Randall. I'm sure people would like to have a little positivity in their lives, and we will find that with the basketball program. And I know you got some content coming from there as well. Do you want to share that content, or would you rather hold off and people can be surprised when they see it?
Let's go with that, but
okay,
definitely
all right.
Some basketball stories on the way.
Yeah, all right. So BadgerConnect.com, go check it out and subscribe there. All right.
That was a heavy sigh. Here we go.
Well, what went right yesterday for Wisconsin as they lose to Maryland?
When we do these segments, we often talk about it being the shortest what went right segment we've done. And I think every time we do this, it becomes shorter and shorter. But this will probably be a record because this was the most embarrassing loss of so many embarrassing losses. We will get to that. Billy Edwards Jr. threw a 45-yard completion to Tretch Kekahuna on the first series. That was good. Hey, Hunter Simmons might be the truth. I kid, but he did throw a 13-yard touchdown pass to Lance Mason so the Badgers could actually get into the end zone. And the run defense, still good, just can't stop a nosebleed in the pass game. So every good thing has a caveat because it was atrocious all the way around elsewhere. But that is all I have to say about what went right. And if you're looking for positives out of this show, you're not going to find very many. I think anybody with a pulse who's paid attention to the Badgers understands the state of the program. And right now it is not good.
All right, moving on. What went wrong?
Where the hell do we start, Zach?
My guess is November of 2022.
with the decision to hire Luke Fickell and bypass Jim Leonard.
Again, we're going to get into that, but just that's where all this started, right? What happened on that week leading into the Minnesota game, and then right after the Minnesota game, this is where it started. So if we want to talk about what went wrong, you asked where to start. That's where I would start, but we're not going to do that yet. We're going to do that in a little bit. Let's talk about this game. And from the jump, you get that big play from Tretch Kekahuna, and what happens at the end of that drive?
38-yard field goal by Nathaniel Vakos is blocked.
And then later on, you get stopped, have to punt. What happens then?
Blocked. By the way, that's how I opened my story on the two plays before that. It's indicative of everything Wisconsin football is right now. You have Jeff Grimes putting together perhaps his most inventive play, one of them. I know he's tried a lot of tricks. You line up three offensive linemen wide right. You do this jet sweep to Dylan Jones, 7-yard gain. Okay, you're across midfield. You're down a touchdown. You need something desperately with a backup quarterback and a third-string center, and then Ryan Corey, who had played all of 13 snaps in his career before starting because of injuries, snaps the ball over Dylan Jones' head, 23-yard loss. And that wrecks the drive, leads to the block punt. Maryland scores again. This bad boy is over.
So back-to-back special teams miscues. Plus, it felt like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it felt like every time they got something going, Jeff Grimes decided to pull out an exotic play. And
there were a lot of those.
Rarely did it go well. And the idea that you have to have exotic plays to beat teams, that means you can't beat teams. And yet when they were running some of their own stuff, or not own stuff, but running some of their stuff, they were having success. And then they would try and get fancy, and mistakes would happen. A loss would happen. A snap over the head would happen. Like, it just, there are shoot yourself in the foot mistakes. And it felt like that was a continuing theme yesterday. And let's be fair, the last couple of years, and I know we mentioned this on last week's show leading into this game, but it just felt like every single time they got any kind of momentum going, here comes the exotic play. Here comes the play that you feel like you're trying to outsmart yourself.
I think it speaks to perhaps a lack of confidence in the ability to consistently execute between the tackles. And they're hamstrung, no doubt about it. They started 3 redshirt freshmen on the O-line for the first time in a decade. 2 of those guys have at least started a couple games. You're asking a lot out of them. At the same time, you continue to go to your bag of tricks. And when it doesn't work, man, it doesn't work. You know, I think of the direct snap to Cade Giacomelli, who then pitches it back to Danny O'Neal. That was a disaster. And what's funny is when we watch practices, we're allowed to talk about who's doing well, who's not doing well. We're not allowed to talk about plays we see, trick plays we see, which makes sense. They need to be able to do what they need to do and keep those in their bag of tricks until they bring them out. But the Tyrell Henry reverse, where he ends up throwing a pass, what's so funny about that is every time they ran that in camp, every time, it was a touchdown pass that fooled the defense. And I was waiting for them to bust it out. I thought it would come against Alabama. Like, why would you do that in the first 2 games? Save it for a moment it mattered. And then they break it out, and he just chucks it down there. No one's open, and it should have been intercepted. And it's just yet another illustration. And I get that's a small point of how bad things are going, because I'm not kidding. 100% ratio of passes to touchdowns in practice, and it didn't work. But obviously they are trying so many different things, and very few of them are going right.
I was shocked to see that throw, because that's not the throw we saw in practice. You know what I mean? Like, it was a lollipop, just threw it up there. Like, that was not what it would look like at all in practice. He's got a gun, and instead, and look, he was pressured, right? Like, there was some people in his face. There was nobody out open downfield. It was, I would assume, and the case with a lot of these things, they worked in practice, and it's not being carried over to the game. And we talked to Dylan Jones leading into the game, and he was like, we were like, what gives you such confidence that this is going to be an offense that's going to perk up and get going against Maryland in the Big Ten opener? And he said, practice. What we're doing in practice. Just look. I feel a lot of confidence going into this one. And I probably think that they probably had some confidence going into it, just in terms of being able to run those plays. But as soon as one went bad, all the confidence in the world went out the door. And there is just zero confidence, especially on offense, for this team right now. And Luke Fickell mentioned that afterwards. But in this game, you could see it. They just did not have any ability to overcome adversity that was thrown in their face. And the defense did I guess, as best a job as they could in terms of some of the field position issues that they were faced. I mean, Maryland started their first touchdown drive at like the 4-yard line after Danny O'Neal's interception. You had the block punt, putting the other one deep into their own territory as well. Like, those are tough situations if you're Wisconsin's defense. I don't know what we would expect out of a team to bow up and get a stop there. Probably, I mean, obviously that's what you want, but the defense was put in so many bad situations because of special teams and because of offense.
There are so many things spinning in my head right now as you're talking, Zach, because of how many things went wrong. I think it's worth acknowledging, and this is not excuse making at all, because they've been terrible either way. But when you brought up Dylan Jones, I was just thinking about the injuries and how they've piled up. He suffers a lower body injury in the second quarter. He doesn't come back into the game. You've got the injuries along the offensive line. Jake Renfro couldn't go. Now, Kerry Kadonko came in and snapped once because the helmet popped off for Ryan Corey, but you've got a third-string center. Obviously, we've talked about Kevin Haywood's injury. You didn't have Preston Zachman on the back end. You can go on down the list. You know, Tucker Ashcraft is hurt. It wouldn't hurt to have those guys in there, but when you're talking about things that have gone wrong, all those injuries pile up. Billy Edwards Jr., which we talked about going into the game. how much do you want to put him in harm's way when it's pretty clear he doesn't have any mobility? And I said that after watching him throw on the sideline before the Alabama game. Like, what is Wisconsin doing here? And for one series, it looked like, well, if he can hang around in the pocket, he can deliver a nice ball. But as soon as he got flushed, immediately got hurt. And you could see him calling over saying, I gotta come out, put Danny O'Neal back in, even though the plan was to play both of them. That was it for Billy, no matter how much he tried to ride the bike on the sideline. So that's another thing that went wrong. Defensively, yes, they've been put in some bad spots. They also give up too many big plays. There's the big hitter at the end of the first half that leads to a field goal. And you could say that I don't know what the offense was doing with clock management, but they also can't do anything. Think about, it's 3rd and 1, right? You need 1 friggin' yard and you go backwards for a 2-yard loss and you're putting yourself in a terrible spot. Danny O'Neal was on the run all the time. Some of them were probably self-inflicted. I mean, it's
get rid of the ball.
12, huh?
Get rid of the ball.
Yeah, it's 3rd and 12. He's running backwards. He takes a 19-yard loss in the fourth quarter to take him out of field goal range and force him to punt. They were going to lose anyway. He sacked 6 times. That's absurd. So there are more things that went wrong, but those are the things kind of spinning in my head. Big picture wise, there's, what do they do well, basically? Or what do they do better now than they did a few years ago? And I'm looking at this going, because we talked about the so-called must-win game in week 4 and how you needed to feel coming into your first bye week. You could be 3-1 overall, 1-0 in the Big Ten, and now they're 2-2, 0-1. And I'm just saying, if there are a couple wins out there the rest of the way, I'm struggling to find them. But one more thing I wanted to say about the adversity thing, because I think it's interesting. Luke Fickell talked about when John Gruden spoke to the team over the summer, and you can find this speech, at least a few minutes of it, on social media. And Luke talked about this idea of pound the rock, which is what Gruden was saying them. And again, you can watch this video. I went back and watched it just for context. And he said, if one of you pounds the rock, that rock won't crack. If 2 of you do it, that rock won't crack. It was a metaphor for the togetherness required for everyone to work together, and ultimately you can crack that rock. And that all sounds good in the summer, but you are right, Zach. They fold like a card table at the first sign of adversity against any halfway decent team. And look, maybe that's not a fair assessment, but I think 29 games in since the start of 2023, what we've seen shows that. And the fact that Luke is talking about that after the game, not in that way, but basically saying when they face adversity, they don't do a good job of overcoming it. You can kind of see it, that wave that rushes over you when something bad starts to happen. And it requires talent and execution too. And they obviously don't seem to have those things. But that mindset that they talked about all offseason about being stronger and in a better position to win, have you seen it? I don't see it.
Absolutely not. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. And you want to blame injuries. You want to blame coaching staff. You want to blame the situation that they found themselves in moving into a new offense, like all that plays into it. But they folding like a deck of cards, as you said, is fair. You know what I mean? Like when it is. And again, the defense, I'm specifically talking about the offense. As soon as one thing goes bad, it's done. Defensively, they're better at kind of pushing stuff aside and going. And that's, I think, in large part because they are an old group, especially up front. You know, the strength of this team, the front seven, because of that age, because of that experience, do a better job of perhaps not letting one play lead into another. But what the hell were they doing at the end of the half to get beat deep? That's the only thing. That's the only thing you can't do. Do not get beat deep. And they get beat deep. And they hit the field goal to go in 20-0 instead of 17-0. And would it have mattered at 17-0? Absolutely not, because there's not a chance in hell that Wisconsin's offense was going to score 17 points. But how do you get beat over the top like that when that's the only thing you can't do?
Right.
Just split the safeties right down the middle. Again, Preston Zachman not playing, so Matt Young got an opportunity to start and play a bunch, and it does not look like Preston Zachman's going to be back anytime soon. He was on a scooter with a walking boot on. So I guess we'll see, but only thing can happen, and it happens.
On the NBC broadcast, that they did say out for the foreseeable future. And obviously when the TV broadcasters, generally they talk with the coach, maybe the coordinators the day before, and they get all the intel on the program that they share once the broadcast begins. But I thought that was sort of eye-opening, like, oh, obviously they've been told this is kind of a long-term thing, and that's not great. Zachman, not a flashy player, but he generally gets the job done. We saw the 2 interceptions in week 1. You're right though, Zach. They go under center. It's a play action pass. It's like the secondary was just thinking, oh, they're going to get a 3-yard run and that's it, and they were just beaten. And then Malik Washington, this whole Austin Brown was talking earlier in the week about they love to get the ball on the outside, try to hit the big play. We got to make him uncomfortable, force him to throw the checkdowns. His completion percentage wasn't necessarily great, but he hit the big play, ends up with 250 plus yards, a pair of touchdowns, no interceptions. He throws a 62-yard touchdown pass. It's just all the things you can't do, Wisconsin did. And while the defense to me is clearly ahead of the offense, I thought this defense would at least give Wisconsin a chance to be in games. And I still think they're capable of doing that, because you're right. You can't expect them to keep an offense out of the end zone when they take over at their 4 and when you keep shooting yourselves in the foot. But those big plays, they're backbreakers in critical moments as well.
Well, I mean, I'll acknowledge that he had to start defensively, had to start 2 drives deep in their own territory. They also started a drive from their 1-yard line and went 99 yards, capped off by that long touchdown to make it 27 to 6 or 27 to 3 in the fourth quarter. Yeah, in the fourth quarter. So
after giving up a 98-yard drive against Alabama, I believe.
Right? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's not good. But let's talk about the decision to even put Billy Edwards Jr. out there. I'm not going to call it coaching malpractice. I'm not going to go that far, but it kind of feels like it a little bit. He was not ready. And whether he was cleared by the medical staff or cleared by himself, he was not ready to be out there. You said it. As soon as he had to run, as soon as he had to get out of the pocket, he was screwed. Like, there was just he wasn't healthy enough to do it. And I get that it was his former team. I get that it's his final year. I get all of that. But the fact that he was able to re-injure it with just one play of having to be outside the pocket suggests that he wasn't close to being ready. And for some God knows reason, I have no idea why you would do that other than him saying, I'm good, the medical staff clearing him and say, I want to play against Maryland. Save him from himself. Isn't that what Luke Fickell says all the time about these guys? Save them from themselves. You didn't save Billy Edwards from himself. He should not have been out there. And you gave him 50% of the snaps or whatever it was. In talking to Danny O'Neill earlier in the week, he said, I still got I got a majority of the reps, but that could have been 51-49, right? Like that. Getting Billy ready for that game screwed Danny over, right? It didn't give him the more opportunities that he needed to get into the flow, not even in the flow, but to get going for this game against Maryland. And that's just not fair to the rest of the team. But I totally understand where Billy Edwards Jr. is coming from. He wants to be on the field, but they screwed up their chances to win that game by putting him out there.
It's almost like they're trying to will positive things into existence. And I totally understand Billy's position. I can't fault him for it. Like, man, this is such a big deal for me. I was there a year ago. I want to be a part of this. And as Luke talked about after the game, when he's addressing leadership, and because, before he's praising to some degree how, well, they don't have any captains because there's a leadership group of 14 guys. And yet at the same time, yesterday, he's talking about how you need a single leader to sometimes step up. And Billy is that guy. And so maybe you think this unit will rally around Billy and Billy will be okay. But he also said in practice, because how can you do this? He didn't take any shots. Quarterbacks don't take shots in general. I highly doubt they had him rolling out of the pocket. He was probably just standing there like a statue and seeing what he could give. But look, is Wisconsin going to win the game if Danny gets all the snaps? It's hard for me to say that, but you're right. You're not putting the team in the best position, whatever the ratio of snaps is, because you have to know. You're just hoping. You're just willing something to happen. As soon as Billy rolls out of the pocket, it has the potential to be problematic. And it was clear going into the game, the plan was rotate them to some degree, because the first snap of the second series was Danny going into the game and rolling out and getting a gain. And then they put Billy in there. So I don't know exactly what it would have looked like had Billy been healthy. Maybe it was, look, if Billy's dealing and he can stand in the pocket, you keep him in there as long as you can. But just a bad call all the way around, and we saw why. And now, because we talked about this too leading into the game. Okay, if Billy's not 100%, which is what I've said all along, at 100%, absolutely, he's your starter. When he's not, why would you put him in harm's way, especially with an offensive line that is struggling to protect anybody? Because now you're in a spot where it's aggravated. How long's he out now? Is it realistic to believe he's going to play against Michigan? I mean, if you can't move, is it going to get better with one bye weekend? And I also wonder about just what are they going to do at quarterback now? Danny O'Neill, maybe it's just something minor. And Luke is talking about, like, we wouldn't want to put him back out in a situation where basically the game is over. Hunter Simmons went in and he looked good. I don't know how much that matters late in the game, but they've got serious problems, and I don't know where they go with the Billy Edwards Jr. situation, because when would he realistically be 100% based on what we saw?
December? No. The thing about him talking about the leaders, I feel like a continuation of perhaps talking out of either side of your mouth on things. Is it not? Like, you say in one breath that we're going to have a bunch of leaders, and we'll see at the end of the year, maybe certain guys will step up and it'll be that way. And now you're at a point saying, well, we need that one guy. We need that one guy to step up. Can't have both ways. Either you have a bunch of leaders or you have one or two or three. But you can't say we like that. We like having all those leaders. That leadership council is 14 people. But you are certainly playing without two guys that certainly would be leaders if they were on the field. Jake Renfro and Billy Edwards Jr. And both those are offense. Those are the guys that are able to rally people. We know that Danny O'Neill has some moxie and guys like that in him. But you need your starting quarterback. You want your starting center. You'd like to have your starting tight end. You'd like to have your starting left tackle. All those things are true, but you don't have them. And you have to find a way forward without, and the offense just hasn't been able to do it. Danny O'Neill, I don't know what he was doing with that ball, that interception. It was, dude could have called a fair catch back there. Live to play another play. Just get rid of the ball, throw it away, or take the sack. That's fine too. Don't turn it over and allow the team to take it back down to the 4-yard line, and you're scoring right away. Danny got crushed. Danny got killed. He took so many big shots. He was sacked 6 times. He ran 12 times for 48 yards. He got sacked 6 times for 55 yards, including the still very weird and what are you doing moments running around in the backfield for that 19-yard loss. That honestly looked like me in college football, like the EA game, like trying to extend the play, running around. I don't know what that was. And after he threw that interception, he never threw the ball down the field. He never threw it past like 15 yards again. That is not what we talked with him about on Tuesday. It was going to be about taking some of those big shots, opening up the playbook, which I guess they did open up the playbook with some of those exotic plays, but he just refused to throw the ball down the field after that. And you're not going to get teams to back up. You're not going to get, and perhaps Maryland just didn't believe that he could throw it down the field. I guess that's certainly a possibility. If Billy can't go, I would seriously consider playing Hunter Simmons, and we'll see how injured Danny O'Neill is. But Hunter Simmons is at least going to throw the ball down the field. He's going to challenge guys down the field, and we saw that on that drive. Like that throw to Lance Mason was a great throw, great catch type of thing, but their quarterback situation is not great. And because they cannot run the ball, they are asking the quarterback to do more than what, quite honestly, Danny's capable of right now. And when that happens, you're seeing the result of it. I just don't know what they do on offense to get it going because they can't run the ball, and their quarterback is not healthy, and the one that is healthy-ish will not challenge teams down the field.
This offense is such a mess right now. It's so disappointing to watch, and obviously unfortunate for everybody involved because it did feel like there were signs of progress in practice and all those things. And when you can't run the ball, that's the thing you had to hang your hat on. You bring in Jeff Grimes, okay, reestablish this physical brand of football. You can't snap the ball consistently. And Ryan is in an absolutely difficult spot. We've talked before. I think there's a lot of talent there. And also you're throwing him into the fire immediately. Think about the other snap, not the one that went 23 yards for a loss, but he snapped the ball so low that Danny fielded it with his knee on the ground. You can't even get the play off. That's just an immediate loss of yardage. But their sacks obviously factor into the stats here. But right now, as a team, they're averaging 3.1 yards per carry, which is an unheard of low level for Wisconsin football. A year ago, when Luke Fickell fired his offensive coordinator, they averaged 4.4 yards per carry, which is still not great by Wisconsin standards. But now you're just in a spot where there are so few big plays. You don't have confidence running between the tackles consistently. You're busting out all these trick plays. You can't rely on downfield shots or really much offensively. And you don't even know if your special teams is going to hold up to flip the field. I just don't know what you hang your hat on. And that is so challenging. So it's, we haven't even gotten into the big picture stuff yet, but I mean, should we get into the Fire Fickell chants at least, or like, where do we even go from here?
Well, I just wanted to mention another special teams thing. Even when the kick didn't get blocked, still missed it, the 50 some odd yard field goal. So it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And it does not, I don't know what they can do to fix it, at least this season. I don't know what they can do to fix it. Other than, as Luke Fickell said, keep pounding. Keep pounding. Can't do anything else about it at this point. But yes, let's dive into Fire Fickell, which happened very early in that game. It was, they made, I don't know if they made note of it on the broadcast before the end of the half, but there were clear chants throughout the first half, especially, I think it was after the block punt, or maybe it was the interception. One of the two. I think it was the interception. And then the block punt, and you heard the chants, Fire Fickell, Fire Fickell. And Luke Fickell heard them as well. What he can do about it and how he handles it, he said, I can't get upset about it. I can't worry about it. I just, feel bad for my family type of stuff, but I can't do anything about it. And I understand where they're coming from. They expect more. And all those coaches' words that you would say in that moment, he said, and it all means nothing. It means absolutely nothing, because he can't fix what ails this team and what ails this program right now. He is not the answer. And so when it comes to what the students were chanting, there's a lot of people that feel that way. And it's hard to disagree at this point, just based on what we've seen through 29 games. It does not feel like this is going up. It feels much the other way. It's going down. It's regression.
It really is. And I don't want to say the direction of where it's headed feels inevitable, because there are 8 regular season games remaining, and we'll get to Chris McIntosh coming out after the game and publicly supporting Fickell, though what else is he going to say in this moment? But
nothing. Say nothing.
There is that, which I suppose would only fuel speculation either way. I know we'll get to that, but in general, it just doesn't seem like he has any answers. If he did, obviously the results would be different, and no matter what he's tried, no matter what levers he's pulled, it hasn't mattered. You bring in Phil Longo, there's excitement about this air raid offense, it's a flop. You bring in Jeff Grimes, there's excitement about getting back to the roots of Wisconsin football, it's a flop. The defense is put in some tough spots, but they also haven't been able to change the game in the way that matters. And when I go back to, like, what are they better at now than 3 years ago, or what can you hang your hat on? When Luke Fickell, after his 29th game since the start of 2023, is talking about, we don't have an identity, we don't know what our identity is, to me says everything. I know technically he's 15-15 as a head coach. I don't really count the bowl game because he didn't do anything other than call a timeout, and that wasn't his team. Since the start of 2023, when he had his coaches and it was his program, he's 14-15 overall. He's 8-11 in the Big Ten. They haven't won a single game of consequence. And I addressed this in the story that I wrote off the game, but the number of embarrassing losses continues to stack up. I feel like you can find an episode we recorded a year ago and just put that on right now, like a record player. Find me the games that they've won that were significant. 0. Find me the embarrassing losses. It's at least a half a dozen. You can go back to 2023 when they were embarrassed against Indiana. I know it was a close game, but at least at that time, Indiana sucked. They were 2-21 in the Big Ten over the previous 3 years. Next week, you show up at home against Northwestern. You're down 3 touchdowns at the half, and you get booed off the field. We know what happened a year ago. You get blown out against Iowa, Nebraska, and Minnesota. I mean, Iowa ran for 329 yards. It's the most Wisconsin's defense have given up in 13 years. Nebraska snapped a 10-game losing streak in the series. You gave yourself no shot against Minnesota. You're getting beat up by your rival, which for a decade and a half, you just kick their ass, and now you can't do that. And I haven't even mentioned the 2 Alabama games that you lost by a combined score of 80-24, and yet I would put the Maryland loss at the top of all the embarrassing losses just because of what has happened, the way it happened. And look, Maryland may end up being much better than we assumed or thought because we didn't know much about them. They were 3-0. They hadn't played a Power 4 team. They had a freshman quarterback. But Wisconsin is clearly worse than what we thought best case scenario would be. It's funny because in the preseason, you and I are talking about what their record could be. And I said 6-6. That was really my best case scenario. You went 5-7. And both of those predictions look optimistic. And we were trying to be realistic in that moment. But it's just hard to have a lot of positivity now. And now you're looking ahead at the last 8 regular season games, wondering, like I said earlier, where are the wins going to come from? You have 5 teams that are ranked. So it's hard for me to see what the path forward is to turn this thing around or get Wisconsin to a level where you feel confident that this is what it needs to be for the future. And on top of that, when you hire a coach and he's the highest paid public employee in the state and you say you want to compete for championships, that stuff all sounds good, but somehow you're further away now than you were 3 years ago. And so I know that this feels like a doom and gloom podcast, but that kind of feels like where we are right now with the football program. And it's hard for me to see how it gets turned around other than you have to hope, as Luke Fickell says, that they figure out a way to put it together. The results on the field right now speak for themselves.
Hope is not a method.
Hope is not a method.
Right? Who said that?
Paul Christ.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I have to say, if anybody listening was watching on TV, I should have sent you this screenshot. I don't know if you saw this. There was a student in the student section after the game. He had a cell phone held up as the camera panned in on him. I don't know how he did this, but it was in huge block letters, and it said, "Save us, Jim Leonard."
He ain't
coming. I'm not saying he would have been the answer. It's a hypothetical. We'll never know, but it's just funny where things are, or sad.
And he's also not coming. So probably should get that out of your minds. The idea of Fire Fickell is a lot easier to say than do because of money that is owed to him. It's north of $25 million. And when you think about what that number would be, it would be the second largest buyout in college football history. It's not on the level of Texas A&M and what they did there with, what was it, like $70 million?
Yeah, insane. Jimbo Fisher. Yeah, he got a one-time payout of like $20 million or $19 million.
Yes, because oil prices were doing well that week. And they were able to find, I still remember the big check. Like they had a big check on the field and this guy's like smiling, like donating money. And I feel like most of it went to buying out Jimbo Fisher. But this would be the second largest, unless it would certainly be negotiated down, you would think. But the idea of firing Fickell, much easier than the actual action of it. And that's in large part because the guy that would have to do it would be admitting a mistake. And at this point, based on what he told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and what he's told the Wisconsin State Journal and Badger Extra, Chris McIntosh has no plans to do that. Now, again, and it was pointed out by Colton in the article, he told Jim Polzin in 2022, 4 days before he fired Paul Chryst, that he wasn't going to fire Paul Chryst. Now, you've laid out that story plenty of times about what happened in that room and how that all played out. And I don't know that he went into that room thinking he was going to fire him. So it's a little bit of a different situation. But I want to say it's unheard of for the athletic director to ask to talk to media in the middle of a season when things aren't going well. He wanted to get it out there. He wanted to give him a public vote of confidence, and a public vote of confidence is the worst vote of confidence you can possibly get. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it does other than piss people off even more. Like, no, I'm going to stay in support of this program. I'm going to back my coach. There's just no need for it. Like if someone had asked to talk to him, okay, that's not what happened yesterday. He did it himself, and it feels just so unnecessary to do it. You're acknowledging what fans are saying, and you're saying, no, we're not doing that. And it just, I just can't imagine any other athletic director doing that, especially at Wisconsin. Can you imagine Barry Alvarez doing that?
I cannot. I think Wisconsin is in a difficult spot financially because after the season, the buyout is $25 million. As you said, it would be the second highest buyout in college football coaching history. Right now, number 2 is Gus Malzahn at Auburn in 2020. It was around $21.5 million, I believe. And you're right, it may be renegotiated. Paul Chryst certainly was, but that's a tough pill to swallow when you've got budget concerns just across the country. And 3 years ago, you paid Paul Chryst double-digit millions of dollars to go away. And I don't know. I could say, what does that solve? Well, you could say maybe it solves what we've seen the last few years. You better be sure of who you're bringing in next. And you end up in a situation where maybe it's a coaching carousel. And I said before, I thought, and other people I talked to, and this was last season, that Luke would get into a 4th year. I still feel that way, but I think if they don't win another game the rest of the year and they go 2-10, all bets feel off to me. That is an awful lot of money to pay someone to not do their job. On the other hand, we know how much revenue football is responsible for. And the worst thing that can happen, as we talked about before this game, there's anger, and what follows is apathy. And once you get that in a fan base, man, that's the worst spot you can be in.
And Chris McIntosh claimed that they're nowhere close to that.
I don't agree with that. I don't. And
Same.
If I'm the athletic director, I probably have to say that. The season ticket situation declining is, I think, a reflection of where things are headed. But, and this is anecdotal, people who are on social media and they're saying, and maybe they didn't, I turned off the game or better off doing something else. Maybe that's easy to say after you lose 27-10 and you're embarrassed at home. But those kinds of things are going to keep happening if the product on the field, fans don't feel it's worth their 3.5 hours of their life.
He said they were nowhere close to it because of the anger. You see the anger. There's no apathy there. There's anger. Well, what about all the thousands of people that did not show up? They had 68,000. I think the announced attendance was 68,000 for a Big Ten game, which is continuing a trend of what happened in the first 2 games, where they were the least attended first 2 home games since 1992, I think it was. That's a long time. So you can sit there and say the people that showed up are angry. Yes, agreed. Thousands, and the 4,000 that didn't re-up. That's apathy. That's not, if you're not showing up, that's apathy. And I don't know why that is difficult to see. The other question is, even if he were to fire Luke Fickell at some point, why should Chris McIntosh get another opportunity to pick the next head coach? Why? I mean, they'll use a search committee, right, and all that good stuff. But why, if you're the chancellor, would you allow a guy who there's been some missteps during his tenure outside of football, but the football head coach is the most important hire he makes, and at this point, it looks like a horrible one. And so, if it continues down this path, and I don't know that we've seen anything that's going to be different, I don't know how you let him make the next hire either. It feels like, and again, people are like, well, some of these other sports are doing well. Chris McIntosh didn't hire Mark Johnson. He didn't hire Greg Gard. Like the programs, especially the forward-facing programs that we see in volleyball with Kelly Sheffield, he didn't make those hires. The football coach is the hire that he made, and he went ahead and did it, and throwing, I don't want to say dirt or sand, kick sand in people's faces by going over Jimmy Leonard, because at the time of the hire, almost everybody was on board with it. But that doesn't mean he gets a free pass when it doesn't work. He's the one that's responsible for it. So, and I think Colton asked him about his own job security and was essentially like, yeah, I'm not worried about that. My time in this program, my time in this state, everything that I've been a part of in this program, I'm not worried about that. Well, you should be worried about it because yes, you played for, Big Ten championship. You won a Big Ten championship. That was almost 30 years ago now. People are very much in what you've done for me lately, and what you've done for them lately has not been anywhere close to good enough for what this program has been for so long.
All fair points. Chris talks often, and I remember talking to him the last Big Ten media days before this year about his own playing career at Wisconsin. And I think the optimism, best case scenario, is that it mirrors that, where when he got here, it was 1995, the redshirt year, they weren't very good, and how it's a process and it takes all this time. And of course, by the end, we know what happened at Wisconsin in the late 90s under Barry Alvarez. But the more we see on the field, the harder it is to believe that that's going to be possible. And so it's a really tricky spot. I don't know what happens if he's got to make that decision to move on, whether he'll be tasked with finding the next coach. And I get we're kicking the can down a little bit because we're still in finishing off week 4 of year 3, but it's not ideal because I think very clearly when he made that decision, his success as athletic director was tied to the success of Luke Fickell. I've written about that since the end of 2022. When you make that kind of decision, when you're going to pay someone an average annual salary of $7.8 million, and again, at the time, lauded as a home run hire because of what Fickell did at Cincinnati. On the other hand, when you come to a new program and you don't know that much about it, even if you say you respect it from afar, we're seeing how difficult it is. And I don't know whether if he had hired someone else, it would have been different. The landscape is so much different than even 5 years ago. Would it be worse? That's hard to say. They're a sub 500 team, which is so far away from what Wisconsin was for so long. So just not a great spot right now for everyone involved.
I mean, what does worse look like?
Well, I just look at what the record would be through 29 games. But this is as poor as it's been in a long, long time, certainly since I've covered the program and really since the early years of Barry Alvarez. And it says something that 5-7 year last season is the worst you've seen in a long time. It speaks to what level Wisconsin was at, but they just keep going backwards. And the Maryland game, to me, it's like you take 1 step forward and 3 steps back. That one was way, way back. And one of those games I think we'll remember for some time, especially if we look back later on this era.
I thought it was very funny. They had 3 first downs and it was 2nd and 3. And then they had the snap over the head of Dylan Jones and it was 3 steps forward, 23 yards back. And that feels very fitting for what this team is at this point, what this program is at this point. Put you on the spot right now. Does he fire Luke Fickell at the end of the year?
I'll say no.
Simply money related?
I think it's a couple things. I think money related, certainly. And the other thing is the decision that you made to go all in on him. Are you going to pull the plug after year 3? I do wonder, well, what do these next 8 games mean? What if you do go 2-10? What if you don't win a game for months? That might change some things. But they also had to know going in how difficult this was going to be, at least in year 3. I think he'll get to year 4. I do. But I'm not the one who makes the decisions. I didn't expect Paul Chryst to be fired 5 games into the 2022 season. But I think with the situation they're in where Chris McIntosh made this move, Fickell's going to get every opportunity to succeed. And it's apples to oranges, I get. But think of Scott Frost at Nebraska. Now, he was a native son and all that. Didn't he get into year 5? And they were a train wreck. Not to say that Wisconsin's doing great right now. I don't know that Fickell's going to get into year 5. I just think he'll get more than the end of this year for a couple of different reasons, even if it doesn't make fans happy.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to go back and look, but I felt like Nebraska was in a lot of games and they just couldn't finish. And saw that yesterday as well against Michigan. But in some of Wisconsin's bigger games, they haven't been able to finish either. But then they've also gotten blown out by teams they shouldn't get blown out by. And that is obviously a significant concern. When it comes down to it. What's the path forward to figure this out? Or is there no path forward?
It's really hard for me to see the path forward. This season, I don't know how you can say it's going to get better when you're playing really good competition. They got to go on the road to Michigan in 2 weeks. Then they play Iowa at home. Maybe if Wisconsin puts its best foot forward, it can somehow pull it off. Then you're playing the number 1 team in the country against Ohio State, playing Oregon, which just destroyed Oregon State, has to play number 2 Penn State. Those are top 5 teams in the country. And I don't think November is going to be particularly easy. I mean, I know Indiana got housed, but that means
other way around.
Illinois got housed, but you got to play Illinois and you got to play Indiana. The path forward is maybe you hope that you have a healthier roster next year. You're able to develop your young players, find some impact transfer portal players, and your schedule isn't as hellacious. But we're talking about all best case scenario where everything goes right.
One thing before we get to listener questions.
I'm sure the questions were few and far between.
Yeah, there was I think I only got 80 of them. So most of them I feel like we probably have talked about, but we'll get that in a second. Any kind of a pass whatsoever for having your starting quarterback, for significantly fewer than 50% of those games that you've lost and won, for that matter.
Yes, to some degree. And also, you still have to go play the football games. So if you want to relitigate what Fickell's record would have been if he had his starting quarterback, maybe it's better, but you're also responsible for putting together a roster that can be functional, even if you lose your quarterback. You think some of these other programs haven't dealt with injuries? That's part of football. So I understand it. And when you look at the totality of Fickell's time here, that's a big part of it. Tanner Mordecai missed a month of the season. Tyler Van Dyke tears his ACL in the 3rd game, and now you've got the Billy Edwards Jr. situation. But if all these other position groups are going to talk about no excuses, it's the same for the head coach.
Absolutely. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to make an excuse, but there's no excuse, right? There's not. And the quarterback does not block on punts. The quarterback does not block on field goals. The quarterback does not defend passes before the half. All those things are other parts of the football team that are not working. And while the quarterback is so important to everything that happens, he doesn't run the ball either. So he's not the one that's up there blocking for the run game, or the one trying to, Danny was, I should say. He's a runner, but you know what I mean by that. And there's so many other things involved here with this program that are not in a good spot, that no matter what, whether Billy Edwards Jr. was out there yesterday or not, the other stuff would have sunk them anyways. So, all right, let's jump into some of these questions, assuming I can find whatever. Do I even have it? There it is. Sorry. There it is.
That's the spirit, by the way. Kind of sums things up.
Whatever. From Ryan, our guy Ryan, people are definitely in on this overreaction or no thing now. So
all right.
So about 60 of them. So we have about 60 questions to answer. We'll try and get through them as quickly as possible.
Okay. I don't know if I have time for 60 questions.
I'm kidding. We won't go. We'll save some of these for a show later in the week. But Ryan says, overreaction or no, Wisconsin loses that game even with a 100% healthy Billy Edwards Jr.
Not an overreaction.
When was the last time Wisconsin was this bad?
Well, that's not an overreaction or no, but a while. I mean, before I covered the team, like 2018, they were not great. They still went 8-5. Last couple of years, not great. Still went to a bowl game 2 years ago, went 5-7 a year ago. Based on everything we've seen this year, they're worse than they were a year ago. And I know injuries haven't helped, but that's all part of it. So when were they worse? You might have to go back to the 90s, frankly. Now, did they have to play who they're about to play? Not regularly, but did they lose to Maryland? I know Maryland wasn't in the Big Ten then, but you get what I'm saying.
Yep. They played, I mean, I would say 2001 when they didn't go to a bowl game, but they also, what's up?
They went 5-7 that year.
They did. And I would say there have been some embarrassing losses at home for sure since then, but that 2001 season where they got just housed by Indiana at home, that to me remains the worst home game of my in my memory. It was like 32-0 at the end of the first quarter. It was bad. It was really, really, really bad. So that is, I don't think Maryland reaches that, but at least that team had like Antoine Randall. Like it was a talented Indiana offense. They couldn't stop anybody. Wisconsin, I think, scored like 30 some odd points in that game, but it was 63-30 something. So yesterday was just the fourth time since 2003 that they've lost as a home favorite by 17 or more. So there was the Illinois game back in 22. There was the Michigan game in 2021. There was the Minnesota game in 2018. And then obviously, as I said, the Maryland game yesterday. So those are four since 2003. Not great at all. Moving on here. Overreaction or no? Jay says Luke Fickell is better suited to be UW's recruiting director as opposed to head coach.
I'll say overreaction, but everything we've said tells you the results speak for themselves at this point.
Jeff says, will the bye open as a 10-point favorite? Maybe more.
Michigan game?
No, the bye.
Oh.
Bye week.
That one went right over my head. Probably.
Richard says, overreaction or no, Luke Fickell does not win another game at UW.
Overreaction. Now, if you say put me on the spot and say when's
the next win?
Might be November. Now, I could have said it might be next year. Maybe I can't wrap my head around the idea that Wisconsin closes the season 0-10. I do think somewhere along the way they'll get one, but I'm not saying they're getting multiples either. Because like I said, when you see what happened against Maryland, you're wondering where are wins going to come from. I'm not, but don't, put me on the spot and pick a specific opponent. I just think somewhere along the way there's a win to be had.
Overreaction no from Matthew. Fickell should have hired Kirk Penny to transform the offense.
Great question. Overreaction, but hilarious.
Overreaction no matter what, this is from Matthew, says no matter how bad things get, Wisconsin won't ever consider the buyout and that they're stuck with Fickell. Is that an overreaction or no?
Oh, I think that's an overreaction.
You think that they will consider it?
I think all options have to be on the table. I just don't know where you get that much. I don't want to say where you get that much money from, but your willingness to do that. So I think it's an overreaction. Everything will be considered. I don't know if they'll move forward with that.
Overreaction no from Jew. He says Marcus Freeman and Gino made Fickell and not the other way around.
I think that's an overreaction. And I mean, now it's looking for ways to poke holes in what he did at Cincinnati. I mean, you cannot take away what happened. Yeah. But part of your responsibility is finding people around you who are really good at what they do. And it's also your part to motivate and lead and inspire. And I'm not going to take away anything Luke accomplished at Cincinnati. What he did was exceptional. There's a reason why nobody else in the non-power 4 conference made a college football playoff. But none of that matters now. None of it does. It did in 2022 and even in 2023 when you're saying, oh, well, look what he's been able to do. Look how he's built a program. And that inspires for a while, but not anymore. But no, I'm not going to say that the assistants that he hired made him. It helped. I want to give Luke credit for what he accomplished there.
I'll give him credit for what he accomplished. They did a great job evaluating talent and then
developing
it and then developing it because there was
100%.
a lot of 2 and 3-star players on that team that ended up going to the playoff. So I think the staff plays a significant part of that.
Definitely, but Luke does as well. And I mean, look how many NFL draft picks they had on that team, but it hasn't translated here.
How many draft picks are on this team?
Yeah, well, they're playing their way out of it. I mean, there's still a few. There's a handful, but you need more than that in order to succeed. And you need people who are great college players too to be able to succeed at this level.
Even Riley Mahlman struggled yesterday.
Yeah,
just getting that Maryland pass rush might be legit. Also, get rid of the ball. The Badgers will. This is from Badger Beatdown. Badgers will not win. This is overreaction or no? Badgers will not win more than 6 football games in a season in the next 5 years.
Oh, I'll say right now, overreaction. I mean, you tell who's the coach going to be? Who's going to be on this roster 5 years to win 6 games? It feels like an awful lot to me. I know it feels horrible right now, and they're certainly not getting to 6 wins this year. It feels like, but 5 years is an eternity in college football.
It is. I would agree. Overreaction or no? Danny O'Neal is worse than Braden Locke.
I guess right now, I don't know. I'll say overreaction. I don't. He started. Well, I guess technically he started 1 game, and there are a lot of other issues at play. I'll give him more time before I make some broad declaration. There are some things he can do that Braden couldn't, and there are some things Braden could do that he couldn't. But obviously, it hasn't been an answer either way for Wisconsin.
Overreaction, no, the Badgers will have less wins than Packers losses this season.
So you're going to have to fill me in on what you think the Packers record is going to be after the regular season.
Currently 2-0. Looking to get to 3-0 here as we're talking later today. That's, I mean, you would essentially say, I mean, if we're not saying that Wisconsin's going to win another game this year.
Well, what do you think? Packers go 13-4 or something like that? Is that?
Well, I mean, if they were, I mean, I certainly don't think Wisconsin's getting to 4 wins. So I don't think it's an overreaction. Well, the overreaction of the Badgers will have that's not an overreaction. I think it's a good chance of it. We'll see though. Lindy says overreaction. No, Paul Chris last team would beat the dog shit out of this current one.
Oh man, I'm trying to remember what the 2022 team looked like. It wasn't great. Graham
Mertz, Braylon Allen, Ches Malusi.
They had some players.
Nick Herbig, Keanu Benton, that's some dudes.
There were some dudes there.
Chimray, little DK action.
I don't know. That feels pretty harsh, but that team feels better than this team. So I think I'd take the 2022 team.
Overreaction? No, the team has quit on Luke Fickell.
No, so I'll say that's an overreaction. This is always a tough one to discern because, what externally, it's not like they don't work hard and they don't try and all that stuff. They just, it's so many different things. They don't seem to have the talent. The execution level stinks. They've got inexperience. They've got injuries, and then they lack belief. But I don't think it's if you put everything you have into it and you go out there, I just don't see that it's quitting. It's so many other different factors. So I'm not going to say that. And that's an easy storyline to bring up when teams start losing and the coach doesn't have the answers. Well, he's lost the team or they've given up on him. I don't believe that's the case. There's just so many other things going wrong.
Overreaction. No, Luke Fickell's an infiltrator inserted into the program by Ohio State to sabotage Wisconsin.
Overreaction.
Not an overreaction. I totally believe that. All right. One more here. Where are you? Sorry. Overreaction or no? I'd rather have PJ Fleck right now.
Is this a question for me or is it a question for you?
People are sick. I'm just going to say it right now. That was a sick thing to do yesterday. Of course I wouldn't rather have PJ Fleck. That is the most overreaction of all overreactions. There's nothing in this world that would ever make me want PJ Fleck to be a head coach of Wisconsin. If it ever happened, it would be the end of this podcast. I would not be covering Wisconsin football if PJ Fleck was the head coach. I'm not. That might be a little hyperbole. I perhaps would get over it, but there would be not a bigger critic of Wisconsin football if PJ Fleck ended up as the head coach of Wisconsin. It's never going to happen. First of all, he would never do it. Second, Wisconsin would never do it. But if they did, it would be a constant, absolute ass chewing every single week about what he did wrong. I cannot believe having to listen to that every single day. Elite this and elite that and row the boat, and it would end me. It would end me. So maybe some people would want to see it, but that is as overreaction gets. I don't care how bad Luke Fickell ever comes to be. I don't care how bad Chris McIntosh, if you want to say that he's been bad at making this hire. There's the only person that you could make right now, an absolute dog shit of a hire would be PJ Fleck. So yes, no, huge overreaction. PJ Fleck, never.
I can appreciate that this is a hill you're willing to die on. And yes, it's hard for me to know how much of this is a bit or not. This gets you more fired up than anything we saw against Maryland.
He's annoying as hell, Jesse.
I'm just gonna step aside and leave it to you to handle this one. But I guess I'd end up being the singular host of the camp if that happened. Yeah. Thankfully you're here, Zach. So thankfully there's no chance in hell that he would ever be the coach. So we don't have to worry about that. But can you probably would like that though. You would probably like him as a head coach because of the things that he says and the interesting things that he says. Hey, dude.
And you would have, it would be you would have to like rename Badger Connect, like it'd be the rowtheboat.com, and it would just be the most ridiculous thing ever. But my guess is that you would actually like it.
Look, I'm going to be honest. I don't have anything against him. I really don't. And this probably doesn't matter, but many years ago, I interviewed for a job to cover the Gophers at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune when PJ Fleck started. Timing didn't work out. Didn't want to go to Minnesota, but like I can appreciate at least what it would be like to cover him, even though a lot of it is about him, but it's not about me.
So it's never about you?
Not right now.
It's always about you.
Is it?
Me, Dia. I'm not saying you're alone in that. There's many people in this business where it's about me.
I just don't have anything against him. That's all I'm saying. But I understand where you're coming from, Zach.
Congratulations. You have nothing against him. I'll take care of it and hold all. I'll take care of our angst, my angst for him. It would be just a ridiculous hire. It would never happen. And to think that you would want PJ Fleck over Luke Fickell because he beat Wisconsin a few times, just no. How about no? Find somebody else. There is 8 billion people in this world. There is somebody better than PJ Fleck to be the Wisconsin head coach. And currently it's Luke Fickell. I'd still take Luke Fickell over PJ Fleck any day. It's just what it is. All right. Oh, one thing before we go. There were people mentioning bring back Barry Alvarez to make the hire. Did the last hire he made obviously was Paul Chryst. That one was easy. The hire he made before was a horrible hire. Yes, 19-7 is good for Gary Anderson. That's great. He also cut bait and ran from his team, quit on his team after getting blown out 59-0, ran away. He was not a fit for this program. And while he is the program and the teams he put out there were certainly better than Luke Fickell's, he was a bad hire. Correct?
Yeah, not a great fit. Left Wisconsin in a very difficult spot, and Paul Chryst deserves a lot of credit for pulling him out of it. If I could say this, and I'm assuming that a lot of this is joking, but like Barry's almost 80. Let Barry be. Just let him chill. He's earned the right.
Yeah, let him talk about point spreads down at Alabama, where he thought Wisconsin would be a favorite. So yeah, they're leave him alone. I believe he's 78. Leave him alone. He's fine. All right. Obviously, Wisconsin on a bye this week. We will be doing another show at some point because there were a ton of questions I didn't get to today. I tried to get to as many of the overreaction no questions as possible. We'll jump into some of the other ones later this week, but we also will have an episode of The Swing at some point this week too, as basketball starting to ramp up a little bit. The team ran for the final time on Bascom Hill. That was the final time, right?
It was on Friday. Actually, practice starts on Monday. Hard to believe because way back when practices began October 15th, it gets earlier and earlier, but it's basketball season. If you've been looking forward to it, it is actually basketball season.
I feel like the bye hits at a perfect time here if you are a Wisconsin fan, because we can talk about basketball, and it is an interesting team and a team that certainly has a lot of new faces that I think a lot of people are going to be excited about. One of them was in a boot. Right? Not a boot. One of them was held out of, or a couple of them were held out of running Bascom, I believe, including Nick Boyd, just trying to, little injury. What did Greg Gard call it? Injury. He was trying to make it so there wasn't any further injury. They're trying to manage it. So there's not any kind of long-term issues. Either way, we're talking basketball. I apologize. We will talk about it on the swing later this week. All right, Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there it is. Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Camp.